I'm at the Concordia Summit with its co-founder, Matthew Swift. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for creating this amazing conference.
Thank you very much, Claudia. It's an honor to have you here today.
So now tell me about the focus on investing in youth this year, because the last two summits, it was just more of a general theme on public-private partnerships.
Yes.
But what inspired that topic? Focus.
Honestly, it was a moment that my co-founder Nick and I came together and we said, let's just get down to it and what are we extremely passionate about. And we have a history working in education when we were working for News Corporation, but also when we were in high school, we started a business together. And so issues like youth unemployment or employment in general, access to capital, security issues, we're very, very passionate about those things.
Right.
And so we sat there and we said, what do we want to talk about and what do we want to do and what will make us extremely excited every day when we come into work? And this was it.
Excellent. And so the Concordia Index is something that you launched. I know you announced it last year.
We released today, yeah.
That's right. Tell us more about the index and what really separates it from other indices.
So it ranks 17 countries around the world on their partnership environment. So we look at everything from the political environment, the private sector or business environment, what sort of the social situation is in each country, and we rate them basically. We do a large series of studies within the country, and we put it to data and we put it to numbers, and we look at an array of things where we can honestly say that this country is either a good place or maybe not a good place to try and execute a public-private partnership. We've looked, Chile was number 1 on the index, which is very interesting, but even more interesting in my opinion is Ghana is number 3. And I think what that shows is a country, very stable governmental system, lots of opportunity for public-private partnerships. So it's not necessarily saying where's the easiest place to do a partnership as much as where's the best place to do a partnership that can have the most impact.
Great.
Interestingly enough, though, the United States ranked number 2.
Oh, great. I was going to say, what makes up, what defines really the best place? Stability. What are some of the things that you've learned?
Well, you look at governmental factors, right? You look at corruption rates. You look at bureaucracy. You look at what it is to work with the government. You look at the private sector, what it is that they're doing. Is the private sector very much controlled by a few special interests, or is it a much more open market? You look at all of those different factors to say, okay, this is a great country to go to, or this is not a great country to go to.
Yeah. So that brings me back to the mission of the Concordia Summit. This, and I know with the Concordia organization, nonprofit, you connect, you convene, you are informing, obviously, people in the private sector, public sector about these issues. So with the mission of, maybe you can share more about the mission of the conference, this annual convening of so many important people.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, Concordia is about public-private partnerships. So we came together and we realized that there was this common ground between the private sector and the public sector that isn't utilized enough, that it's amazing, it's incredible. You make an assumption that people talk to one another, and a lot of times they don't. Things are so much based on communication and collaboration and partnership. If the private sector better understood what the public sector was working on, perhaps the private sector could have or be very motivated to be engaged in that process and have an impact. The interesting thing, going back to our topic this year, one of the things that continues to astound me is you look at a country like Colombia that has gone through a dramatic transformation from a security perspective in the last 10 years. You look at Spain, an established economy with terribly high youth unemployment. You look at Egypt, a country, as we all know, going through significant governmental change, and thus the private sector is also going through significant change. And you look at a place like Detroit. All of these places, different economies, different governmental systems, but they all have serious problems when it comes to youth unemployment.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And then so in terms of the private sectors that are engaging in these kinds of partnerships, is it typically the departments that are working in sustainability and innovation or philanthropy? Is that what's commonly
here's the thing. Right now, all of this, in my opinion, really sits with corporate social responsibility, which is fine, and that's great. But for Concordia, we are a non-political nonprofit that recognizes that companies are trying to make money and governments are trying to sustain themselves.
Right.
The faster we come to that realization, the better off we're going to be, because then we know everyone's interest, we know what's important, we know how to settle on what the common ground or that middle ground is. And so as a nonprofit, I think Concordia is unique in our approach to that.
Right.
We know companies want to make money,
Sure.
but we also know a good thing when we see it. And when a company wants to go into a new market because they have a financial inclusion program, we know that millions of young people having access to basic financial services that otherwise they never would have is a good thing. The company makes money. It's good for young individuals. The same thing goes for any number of different industries. For instance, one of our partners is the U.S. Afghan Women's Council. They've been our partner for almost 2 years now.
Right.
This is an organization that is focused on the rights of women and children in a country where, for a long time, women have very few rights. Interesting fact, Afghanistan is the third largest producer of cashmere in the world. So why aren't more fashion companies or apparel companies
Right.
going to that country?
Yeah.
And one, is it in their interest to? I think it is. But two, imagine the impact that could be had on increased industry, job potential for women, the chance for households to make a second income.
Sure.
And imagine what that will do for something like women's rights. So it doesn't have to be all about what is the social responsibility of a
Right.
company. It can also be about what's simply good for business.
Right.
And that's good for business.
Yeah.
Colombia, again, going back to that case, Colombia being a safe country is good for business, right? And so for a company that's going into the market,
Right.
if they're in that space, they care about the security situation. And understanding what the government is doing is everything.
Yeah. And so what Concordia, the nonprofit, does year round is probably
Yes.
make a lot of those connections, correct?
So Concordia is very much focused right now on gatherings like the summit, annual summit here today. We have a number of events coming up, smaller regional events, one in London, one in Washington soon. But then we are also about research.
Yeah,
You noted the
great.
index that we've put out. We've also done a series of case studies on
Yeah.
Vietnam, Colombia, and Egypt.
Right.
3 important countries, very
Right.
different markets to look at. And so we're very happy with that.
Yeah.
While we do want to eventually be able to build actual public-private partnerships one day, right now we're very focused on how do you connect the dots and then point those people into the right direction.
Great. And so my last question was just sort of what's ahead, or like your biggest hope in coming out of this 2013 conference and into 2014.
So,
these smaller events
yes.
is great.
Yes, and we have something we affectionately call the 928 Project, which stands for September 28th, tomorrow. A project that we've been working on for months now, which is an extremely aggressive follow-up, connecting the dots between lots and
Wow.
lots of different people, being able to have these smaller events, continuing to expand our annual summit, which could not be more important. And I think all of that will result in very good, strong growth for Concordia. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We're also not looking to grow at a, frankly, unsustainable rate. We're very happy with our rate of
It's
growth.
about the impact that you're making.
It's about the impact, but it's also about being practical. I can't stress enough. One side wants to make money, great.
Yeah.
One side wants to sustain itself, great. And we just heard from the foreign minister of Egypt, which I think is, again, a fascinating case in all of this. There are a lot of people who would scoff at the suggestion that Egypt is a good place to invest now. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But the one thing that I do know is that at some point it will be a very good place to invest. So it is gatherings like these, and it is connecting like we do,
Planting the
and
seeds.
research that we do, that will allow the private sector to really know when that moment is. And when that moment happens, that's when it will not only be a great opportunity for business and the government, but it will also really help people.